are there any like puzzles for you about, does anyone feel like they need to do another high number just to practice, or do you guys feel like now you get the concept?
Yeah, I think I understand now that you've showed, clarified that.
Yeah, so basically that's what I would do. If it were me, every single time I get a number that goes beyond the thousands place, I will at least think about this.
Yeah.
Generally, if it only is going to the mon place, I don't have to write this out to get it right. But if it's going anywhere beyond the mon place value, I generally do actually write it out this way. Okay. So somebody's absent today, or somebody just didn't get the paper yet? What are we missing? Oh, okay. Let's see. Is this it? Is this all the people we have left in this class now?
Tell me.
I think this might be it. Yes. I think this might really be it. Okay. So that means we're one person short on the OPI. Is there somebody who would like a second crack at it? Okay. You want me to put you down? I'll just, let's see, I've got a pen around here somewhere. Okay, Avery, okay, so you can just come at 11:30 and stay for one more. Okay, that works. Okay, so any other questions about the numbers? Does everybody feel like they have a good handle on the matchup between the kanji numbers and the kanji pronunciations? How to write the kanji? Are there any questions? Like I noticed some people were still kind of writing their mon a little bit funky. So it is the horizontal line first, the hook that looks like you're starting to write a ka is next, and it does hook under just like a katakana ka, okay? And then this line is actually last, the way most people write it. There are some people who switch that order around.
Paradox.
Yeah, there are some people who do that order a little differently, but this is the way I learned it, and I believe that's the way your textbook teaches it as well. So, so that's mon. Not to be confused, of course, with Q. Okay, everybody's noticed the similarity in look between Q and mon and how to differentiate it? Okay. Everybody's okay with how to write N? You write the outside part first, kind of like you're writing moon, and then the interior piece, vertical first and the horizontal bottom. Okay? Everybody okay with how to write G, o'clock? You do the sun first, then the soil, then the inch.
It's like writing the second part. I didn't know how to do the second part. Like
Okay, let's break it down real quick. So, so this is why I wanted you guys to know those radicals first, because it makes it so much easier to memorize how to write a kanji if the components are all pieces that you've already learned. So you do write the sun first, and the sun, of course, is the vertical, then the bent line, then the inside, then close the bottom, right? And then the soil part is shorter horizontal, vertical cross piece, and then the bottom is the longer horizontal, okay? And then the inch is horizontal, vertical with a hook, little dot. Now I'm writing that with deliberate gaps, partly just so you can see the three components. how they fit together. But when you write it fast, when you write it by hand, it's not unusual for some of those lines to connect a little bit to one another. But you don't have to make these lines touch each other, but some people, it just sort of happens that way when they're writing. So as long as your proportions are roughly like that, it doesn't really matter whether these touch or just are near one another. You do want them to be very close though, if they're not touching. If you do this, it looks like you just wrote two characters, sun, temple. Okay?
Yes.
Those are two separate characters when there's that big of a gap between them. So you want to be careful that if you've got a gap at all, it's a teeny tiny little gap, like the width of one of your lines kind of a gap. Okay? Not the width of a whole character kind of a gap. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, and some people write their sun approximately the same size as either of the other two pieces, just sort of centered. And some people make their sun taller and skinnier so that it's almost the same height as the other two combined. And that's partly personal preference. You'll see font styles that do it both ways. You'll see fonts that make the whole thing like that, and you'll see fonts that make it more like that. Okay, so that's partly just personal style differences. I tend to do more this style, obviously. That's the way I tend to write. But yeah, you want to be able to put those three together in that order. And it makes it very easy to learn your stroke order too, because if you already know the internal stroke order for sun, and the correct stroke order for soil, and the correct stroke order for inch, and you know that in general characters get written from left to right and from top to bottom, you do, if there's a left to right split like there is in this character, you can see the natural split of this character is this way, right? So by definition, anytime you've got a left to right split, unless there's an enclosure piece, there are certain type of enclosure pieces that are sort of an exception to this, but otherwise this is always going to be 1 and 2 in terms of which side of the character you write first, okay? And then once you've split it, when you're just looking at this half of the character, top to bottom, naturally this is your 2 and this is your 3, right? Because you go top to bottom once you're on a single side, right? So if you're splitting this character into its components, you write this one first, then this one, then that one. And if you know the correct stroke order for each piece, and you know that you're going to do them in that order, then it's easy to write the whole character correctly. And as I've mentioned before, if you're writing the whole character correctly with the correct stroke order, first of all, that helps you with your muscle memory. If you write it the same way every time, after a while your muscles in your hand and wrist get used to writing it that way, and it makes it easier to memorize it, easier to write it correctly every time, easier to make it legible, and it makes it easier to read crazy handwriting like that, because you can see where the connections were made, right? And those connections make sense if you know the stroke order. You see that? That probably looked somewhat legible to you guys by now, but a month ago, before you'd encountered any of these, that would have just looked like some crazy scribble, right? Can you see how now you can see the relationship between those two, whereas a month ago you probably would have had a hard time seeing it? That's going to be true of every character as you learn it. Once you've learned it correctly, with the correct stroke order, the cursive, I didn't bother to lift my pen very often version still will make sense. You know, and that's like partially lifting the pen some of the time if I really want to get crazy. But you can still sort of see that there's a relationship between that and that, right?
Looks like costume.
Yeah. I mean, it's a total scribble by this point, but it's still semi-decipherable, right? And you'll get native speakers who, without really thinking about it, you ask them, oh, how do you write your name in kanji? And they scribble it and it looks like that. And the only hope you have of deciphering it, if they just give it to you and you walk away and you don't realize till afterwards what they gave you, your only hope of deciphering it is going to be knowing your stroke order well enough to kind of piece it out. Or kind of tease it apart and say, okay, well, this is probably a sun, and this is probably this, and this is probably that. And yeah, that looks like a character that I can look up, and then you look it up and, oh yeah, it's this one. You know?
If anyone else can read it.
Right.
Ask around.
Yeah.
Can you read this?
Hey.
Yeah.
Is this?
Yeah. But some native speakers, you know, just think about people you know in your own life with English handwriting. How many people do you know who, if you ask them to write something down, it's a scrawl, and you may or may not be able to read it.
At least
And if you give it back to them a week later, they may or may not be able to read it themselves, right? So of course there are going to be people whose handwriting is just atrocious. But in general, if you're dealing with somebody who's trying to write semi-legibly, for some people, that's as close to printing as they really get anymore. You know, so you're just gonna kind of get used to figuring stuff out sometimes. On the other hand, some people, you know, they just scrawl it without thinking about it, give it to you, and then you tell them, I'm having a hard time reading this, and oh, sorry, and they rewrite it for you neater. But not everybody's gonna do that. You know, just like there are people in this country when, you know, they speak with a thick accent and you try to get them to tone the accent down because you're having a hard time following what they're saying, and they can't really do it. You know, you meet some people from Alabama or the Bronx or wherever who they can't turn the accent off. It's the only way they speak. There are Japanese people like that too, that they just can't turn off their original dialects. That's just the only way they know how to talk. But then there are some people who are bidialectal. You know, my friend from Osaka can speak Osaka dialect when she wants to, and she can speak standard Japanese when she wants to, and she can switch back and forth like they were two different languages, which they almost are. You know, so does everybody feel like they're okay with the kanji? Okay. The next thing is I want us to practice reading aloud with kanji that is in context. So we're going to look at Sanbyaku Ichi Peiji, and we've got this little paragraph. It's only a few sentences. It's not super long. Okay, Sanbyaku Ichi Peiji. And you can see the kanji are embedded in the context of the sentences, right? And they've even got one kanji with furigana on it because it's a kanji that we haven't learned yet. This is typical of the way grade school readers are published in Japanese. You know, the grade school reader, like a first grade reader, say, will have all the kanji that the kids have learned up to that point, and a few kanji they haven't studied yet with the furigana on them. And then, you know, as they go up the grades, up the years, they'll increasingly get more and more kanji because they're learning more and more kanji as they go. But they make a point of putting, say, the next few kanji that they're going to be learning in the next few lessons in with the furigana on them so that kids start getting used to seeing them. But they put the furigana on them until they've actually formally studied them. And so that's what this textbook has done on Sanbyaku Ichi Peiji. Sanbyaku Ichi.
Still one page.
301. Right, 301. So, who wants to read the first sentence out loud for us? Hi,
私は毎日7時に起きます。
Hi. So, any problems understanding what that said? Okay. じゃあ I'm going to go to Shiera-san next. We're going to kind of go
Okay.
around this way.
おちゃん
Uchi?
うちで朝ごはんを食べます。
Hi. Okay, and that is?
Something eats breakfast.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, something or someone eats breakfast. What's the uchi de part? What's de? Yeah, location at which something happens. Okay, what's uchi?
My place.
My place, my home. So uchi de is at home. Asa gohan o tabemasu. So someone eats breakfast at home. Which someone might that be? The writer, yes. And how do we know that? Because in the first sentence, we had watashi wa, and in the second sentence, we had no subject at all, which implies in Japanese that whichever subject was already mentioned is still the subject. It's just not being written out because it sounds redundant in Japanese to keep saying watashi wa, watashi wa, watashi wa, watashi wa in every sentence. Okay? In English, we do that, right?
I did this, I did that.
I did this, I did that, I wake up at 7, I eat breakfast, I do this, I do that, I do the next thing, right? To leave the I out of an English sentence makes it an incomplete sentence, right? But in Japanese, it's not. In Japanese, it's perfectly acceptable to leave the watashi wa out. Weird, right? But it's what we're learning. So, watashi wa mainichi shichiji ni okimasu. Every day I get up at 7 o'clock, right? Uchi de asa gohan o tabemasu. I eat breakfast at home. Okay? So she or he, we don't even know, is writing about their daily routine, right? Ja, Sveta-san, the next one. Starting with that kanji. What kanji is that?
It's okay, so it's sun.
Not sun.
Well, no, I just did. I forgot what it's called.
Ah, what number is that?
This is a number.
Yeah, that's a number. And it's a time.
Oh, yeah.
So take a sneak peek at the previous pages. These pages are sticky. So
So
which
it's
number
8.
is that? That's 8, which
Yeah,
is
cool.
pronounced?
Well, here, which is. I'll show you. Hachiji.
Yes, hachiji. There you go. So that's the phrase you've got. Hachiji.
Hachiji ni dai ga ku ikimasu.
Hai, which means?
A couple of o'clock.
No.
No.
Hachiji ni daigaku
I
e
go
ikimasu.
to
I go to where?
Daigaku, which is the university.
Right.
At 8 o'clock. I go
At
to
8
the
o'clock.
university
At 8 o'clock, I go to the university. Very good. Okay, Jaku-san, I'll let you go next. She just read hachiji ni daigaku e ikimasu. So,
Second line is
second
last
line
there.
after. Kuji, remember when it's 9 o'clock, it's pronounced ku.
9時に
はい。
日本語を勉強します。
はい。9時に日本語を勉強します which means?
Study at 9 o'clock.
Yes, studies what?
Japanese language.
Yes, okay, so at 9 o'clock, this person studies Japanese language, right? Okay, Tatiana-san?
12時半に大学で昼ご飯を食べます。
はい。
12:30 I eat lunch at the university.
Right, so at 12:30, notice the han, it's in kanji, but we haven't studied that kanji yet, so they give you the furigana too. So you're not just stuck trying to figure out what that could possibly be, right? So 12時半に大学で昼ご飯を食べます。So this person eats lunch at 12:30 at the college. Dylan-san?
時々コーヒーを飲みます。
はい, which means,
Sometimes I drink coffee.
はい, okay, Avery-san?
4時に、
Yoji,
4時に。
yeah, that's, yon is the normal reading for that kanji, but yo when it's pronounced with yoji,
Okay.
yeah.
So 4時に図書館で本を読みます。
はい
I read books in the library at 4.
Exactly, okay, Andrea-san?
6、5度、うち、
Roku what?
5度、
Roku,
1、5度、
there you go,
うちへ帰ります。
okay.
At around 6 o'clock I return home.
Right, and because it's that particle, it's gonna be pronounced e, not he, right? So, rokuji goro uchi e kaerimasu. So this person returns home at around 6 p.m. Okay, we're back to Alex.
10時にテレビを見ます。
Right.
10 o'clock you watch TV.
Yep, this person watches TV at 10, and then the last sentence, Sierra-san.
12時頃寝ます。
Right.
And I go to sleep at 12.
Yes, go to sleep at 12. Okay. Any questions about the sentences?
Do we do it AM or PM at the end of these? Because I feel like it doesn't specify. At least I'm just going to eat breakfast in the morning, but
Yeah.
on the side it really doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, you can if you want to, if that makes it less confusing for you, go ahead and fill those in with AM and PM too. Okay, so were there any sentences that were confusing, any kanji usages that were confusing? Did everybody notice how if your normal pronunciation of the phrase is different from the normal pronunciation of the particular kanji, the alternate reading that's normal for that phrase takes precedence. So, you know, this kanji by itself is yon, this kanji by itself is kyu, but when you write 4 o'clock, although you write it like yonji, it's always pronounced yoji, right? And when you write 9 o'clock, it's pronounced kuji, right? So that's one of the interesting things about kanji. It doesn't convey which pronunciation you're using. If you've got more than one possibility for pronunciation, you have to know which pronunciation applies to that particular kanji compound. Right?
Now, are those just different like onyomi, kunyomi readings, or are they?
In some cases, they're alternate onyomi or alternate kunyomi readings because there's more than one of each sometimes. So in the case of yon, for example, yon is the normal reading for that kanji, right? Yo is an alternate reading for that kanji. Shi is another alternate reading for that kanji, right? So if you've got a compound like the yoji, it takes the yo reading, right? But if you give this one, let's see, yon hyaku is the proper reading there, right? If you're doing Now, this one we had in the radicals, but we haven't learned to pronounce it yet in Japanese, but it is gatsu in this case, which means month. Shigatsu is what you call April in Japanese. It's never called Yongatsu when you're talking about the month of April. Okay?
Spelling it maybe, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
But, well, all of these can be written with furigana on them for the sake of learners, but in a text aimed at adult Japanese readers, none of these would have furigana because a Japanese native speaker would already know this is shigatsu, that's yonkyaku, that's yoji. Okay, so that's one of the things about kanji that you just kind of have to get used to, is the fact that all these different alternate pronunciations are just part of the way the language is, and you just kind of have to get used to the fact that you're not going to pronounce this exactly the same way every time you see it. That's the difference between hiragana and kanji. If you see hiragana, shigatsu, you know to read it shigatsu, no matter what, right? But when you see the kanji like this, well, you can call it shi, you can call it yon. In some contexts, you're going to call it yo, like yoji. Okay? Most people, when it's just a standalone number like this, will call it one of its normal readings, either yon or shi. But there are multiple readings for pretty much every kanji in the language. Minimum two, one onyomi and one kunyomi. But sometimes a particular kanji might have 3 or 4 onyomi and 3 or 4 kunyomi. So, not every kanji is the same. There are some that are very straightforward. Go, the number 5, doesn't have a lot of alternate readings. Yon has more. You know, I think Go honestly just has the one onyomi and the one kunyomi. Go and Itsutsu. But no, actually, there's more than one of those two. No, I think of it. They're just the other one's just very rare. So, but that's part of the nature of kanji in Japanese. Okay, Chinese doesn't have nearly as many characters that have multiple readings to them within a single dialect. But of course,
No, but of
if
course
you're
that's
changing
50
dialects,
50 dialects.
yeah, there's so many different dialects, and yes, if you're changing dialects, then it changes pronunciation. You can almost guarantee it. You know, so for example, I don't know a lot of any other dialect other than Mandarin, but I know that the kanji that's pronounced hao in Mandarin is hope in Cantonese. Entirely different sound, right? And any Chinese people who read can read that character, but depending on what their native dialect is, they're going to pronounce it one of a dozen different ways. In Japanese, this one's pronounced ski, or like, or it's the ko in okonomiyaki. And so again, different crazy pronunciations depending on context, okay? But what our textbook is doing is it's introducing them incrementally. So it's showing you, look, here's a standard pronunciation that you already know for a vocabulary word you already know, and by the way, here's what the kanji for it looks like, and so start learning how to write this kanji and read it this way. And oh, yon, you already know a couple of different pronunciations for yon, so here's some context. Yoji, yon, yonkyaku, shigatsu. You know, so it's showing you the context for some of those differences. Okay? But the other side of this is, starting in lesson 4, we're going to learn some characters that actually have the same pronunciation as one another, but they're entirely different kanji with different meanings. Just because they sound alike does not make them interchangeable. Okay, so if the person's name is Tanaka, the ta in Tanaka is the one that means rice field. It is not the one that means to eat. Okay, you cannot call Mr. Tanaka eat in the middle. It doesn't work. His name means middle of the rice field, not middle of eating.
Donut hole.
Yeah. So, you cannot interchange those just because they happen to be pronounced alike. That's an important point also. I leave these guys for the other class to do. Does that make sense? So it's important to practice reading the kanji in context, and it's important to practice writing them, paying attention to those alternate pronunciations that exist that we've already talked about, and getting used to reading somebody's crazy scroll. Are you getting used to the idea that that means that means that?
I would probably be very confused at that one, but I could figure out that one.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's progress, because a couple months ago, you would have thought that was chicken scratch, right?
That looks like chicken scratch though.
That still looks like chicken scratch, but it gets better. You get more used to it the more you look at it. And the more you write it yourself in the correct stroke order, the easier it gets to decipher when somebody else didn't lift their pen to write it. This also, by the way, helps with smartphone kanji lookup. If you've got the handwriting pad version in your iPhone where you can turn on a dictionary app and set it to handwrite the characters, you can do this with your finger on the screen and have it look up the character for you. And it'll usually, based on what you wrote, it'll give you a few options that pop up. If your stroke order is totally, completely off, the options that it pops up for you, probably none of them will be the one you meant. But if you write the stroke order fairly close to correct, chances are one of those pop-up characters will be the one that you intended, and you can then click on that one and get your definition. So even if you're looking at a character you've never seen before, if you can decipher based on basic stroke order rules how it's probably meant to be written, you can look it up that way, which is way easier than the old-fashioned style of looking up kanji. It used to be, if you were using a paper dictionary, you had to be able to pull apart the pieces and figure out what you thought the radical might be and look it up by the radical index, and then within that radical as the header, how many strokes were left on the character. And if it was, the sun radical and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strokes left, then you'd look under sun radical, 6 extra strokes, and you just have to scan through the list until you got to G. And it was a real hassle. And then if you counted wrong, you might be looking in the wrong part of the dictionary. And then you'll never find it. So, okay, so we did that. Did anybody already do the homework where you wrote about your daily routine? No? Okay. If you did, we could read them. If not, please do that as part of your homework. That is one of the homework points, is doing that exercise. Okay? You got one, Dylan? You want to read it to us?
Say number 3? No.
Just number 3 and
Roman numeral 3 in the
301.
content section.
It
Yeah.
looks like a story, am I right?
Okay.
Looks
Go,
like a
go.
story.
私は毎日午前7時に起きます。It's nice. I put the furigana in for myself.
There you go.
9時に大学へ行きます。 先生は日本語を話します。私は聞きます。
はい。
11時に日本語をLL で勉強します。So, language lab.
はい。L is abbreviation for language lab.
LL.
はい。
So, 12時半、12時半に、昼ご飯を、大学で食べます。午後2時頃、家へ帰ります。4時に晩ご飯をします。So I mean to say I make the dinner. I said do the dinner.
Okay, yeah, we haven't learned
How to cook.
tsukurimasu yet,
Yeah, yeah.
or dorishimasu.
So I just said I do the dinner.
Okay.
毎晩音楽を練習します。So
いいです
that's what
ね。
makes sense. Alright.
Yep.
10時半に寝ます。
はい、いいですね。Okay, so when you say 音楽を練習します, I assume you mean you practice
Practice
an
the music,
instrument.
yeah.
That's great. Yeah, so that's a terrific model for how you can do that, and that's really good practice for making sure you understand how to not just make a single sentence, but how to actually put a coherent little paragraph together, which you guys should be capable of at this point. Right?
And where is that activity at? Is it in
That's
chapter
the-
3?
That's the bottom.
Yeah, it was chapter 3,
Write about every day.
page 301. Under the little paragraph that we just read out loud, there's a little comprehension activity that is also part of the homework assignment, and then below that is a writing practice activity where they encourage you to use that paragraph we just read as a model or a template and do a similar paragraph about yourself.
Alright.
And this is really good practice because what's one of the first things Japanese people always want to do? They always want to ask you to stand up and do a self-introduction in front of the group. So you go to Japan as an exchange student or as the new English teacher for the local village or whatever, and everywhere you go, people want you to do little self-introductions, you know. Oh, look, I'm taking you out to dinner with my 3 friends. Introduce yourself to my 3 friends. Or, oh, there's a welcome to Japan party for all the new gaijin, and everybody's going to take turns standing up and introducing themselves. You know,
Pop quiz in
and,
Japanese.
Yeah.
Pop quiz, yeah.
yeah, what's that?
I said pop quiz.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, they do it constantly. It's like every opportunity, they want the gaijin to come stand up and introduce themselves and tell about themselves. And the more you can tell about yourself, the better they like it.
Do they not
So-
just have the same fear of public speaking that we do? Like, you know, in America, it's like a big deal to stand up in front of people.
I'm not sure. I
I would
think
assume.
I think that it's just such an accepted part of what's expected that even if they're afraid of it, they just accept that they're gonna have to do it anyway.
They've been doing it.
Yeah, well, and Japanese people, like, most Japanese kids, from the time they're really small, they're all in chorus or choir at school. It's like a standard part of schooling to be in the choir all the way through grade school. And so by the time they're company employees and they're going to karaoke after work with their work buddies and they have to get up and sing, they've got fairly decent voices for the most part, and the ones who feel like their voices aren't good enough, they practice in secret a lot, so that when they do have to get up in front of their coworkers, they might be half drunk, but they can still sing. You know, and, you know, they may only, you know, the ones who are shy or don't like to sing, they might have like 1 or 2 songs that they practice to death, and that's all they can do. But they do that much because you have to participate. It's like part of group bonding is you have to participate in this stuff. You can't say, no, 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 I'm not gonna do it, because then it's like you're rejecting being part of that group, and that's not good. So you have to participate, and the same thing with the self-intros. They'll all do it. Everybody will take turns, but it'll be literally like, okay, Alex, you're the new person here, so you go first. You introduce yourself first, and then, you know, Takashi will do it, and then, you know, Mariko will do it, and then whoever else in the group, but they'll always want you to do it too.
It's very inclusive then, to try to
Yeah.
include you.
Yeah, yeah, and that is a good point. It's very inclusive, and to reject being included in something like that is also to reject the group, which makes yourself more of an outsider. If they're including you, that's a good thing, you know, because that's how Japanese society is. They always want to be inclusive. And so if they're including you, even though you're from another country, that means that they're accepting you as part of their group, as one of them, and wanting you to be part of their group and fit in with them. And you gotta make an effort to fit in with them so that they can get comfortable with you and like you. You know, if you're saying, oh, no, no, I can't sing, there's a certain amount of that kind of protestation that you can get away with as, you know, Japanese style modesty, but eventually you're gonna have to get up and sing, even if you're horrible.
You better
Yeah.
start drinking
Even-
early.
Yeah, even if you cannot carry a tune in a bucket, pick one song that's likely to be on every karaoke machine in Japan and train yourself to be able to manage it, even if it's horrible. They don't care that you're out of tune. They care that you're participating in their group activity. Okay, it's much more important for you to participate than it is for you to spare their ears, even if you're way out of tune. So, you know, and I can tell you right now, Beatles, that's the way to go. If you can't sing anything else, the Beatles or Frank Sinatra, My Way and Yesterday from the Beatles will always be on every karaoke machine in the whole country. So you can pick one of those and you're safe. Just pick one. It doesn't matter how far out of tune you are. If you can just sing that one song, you'll be fine. If you can sing them both, even better. But those were two of the songs that were always they were always on the menu. So you can always get away with Yesterday or My Way.
Polly.
Yeah. Other songs may or may not be available. You know, if your favorite song that you feel like you can really sing for sure is something by Bon Jovi, it may or may not be in there, you know, but Yesterday and My Way are always there. You know, and the same thing goes for Japanese songs. If you're really gung-ho to learn a Japanese song, great, but make sure it's one that's going to be there so that you're not stuck singing it a cappella. Let's look at the dialogue now on 101 page. So they've got a little mini dialogue that is modeled after the kaiwa from the very beginning of the chapter. Okay, so it's basically this little invitation thing, right? Where somebody's inviting you to do something and you're not sure you can, and then they make a different suggestion and you say okay, right? So I want two people to read this little dialogue as it exists on page 101 first. Who wants to read part A? Hi. And who wants to read part B? Hi. Goes off. Okay. So you can put her name in there. So.
Oh, okay. Seta-san, what is this kind of
Yeah. Sveta-san wa
Seta-san wa
tennis
tennis shimasu ka?
tennis o shimasu.
Tennis wo shimasu ka? Okay.
And do I choose one of the answers or just go with hi?
Just go with hi
Hi.
for now.
じゃあ、日曜日にテニスを
しません。
しませんか？
日曜日。
日曜日はじゃあ
ちょっと。That's a yo.
I keep thinking it's a ya. ちょっと
ちょっと。
ちょっと
はい、just ちょっと。Okay.
そうですか。そうですか。じゃあ、
土曜
土
日。
曜日はどうですか？
家ですか？
いい
いいです
ですね。
ですね。はい、いいですね。Okay. So does everybody understand what just happened there?
I got invited.
Okay, yeah. So she first asked, hey, do you like tennis? Do you play tennis? Hi, yes I do. Okay, how about playing tennis on Sunday? Sundays, not so great. Oh, really? In that case, how about Saturday? Yeah, Saturday's good. Okay, so you invited her to play tennis and eventually you guys agreed on a day that works, right? So that's like the template they want you to use, and that's going to be one of the scenarios for you to work with in the OPI also. So what I want us to do now is using that as a template. I want everybody to take turns practicing doing that with a partner. So we've got exactly 8 people, so everybody can pair off with someone, and I'm going to kind of circulate and help you guys, so you can alter this if you want to. You can start by just doing this dialogue if you want.
So is the other class that has one more person then?
Yeah, the other
Okay,
the
because I was
other
like,
class
there's-
has uneven number, yeah. So, so you can start by using this template, and then you can alter it as you like. Okay, so you can do different things. And let's see, Avery, you want to turn around and work with Jack there? And I'll kind of walk around a little bit and see if anybody is struggling and needs help.
It looks like a rose.
That's
You're doing
Daijoubu desu ka?
like flowers too.
No,
That's what you're doing there.
Allergies or?
Yeah, I'm sick this week for
Oh.
some reason, so I brought a bunch of tissues.
Okay, well, it's good you can prepare.
Yeah. Yesterday my nose was running in the morning, so I bought 2 packs. So. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah, first. So I'll just run through it.
Okay.
I'll go first, so.
Sierra-san.
ジャンさんはテニスをしますか？
映画を見ますか？
じゃあ日曜日に
じゃあ
テニスをしませんか？
日曜日
どうですか？
Very well.
そうですか。じゃあ
Just means I want tea.
土曜日はどうですか？
Saturday. No, that's in the next sentence. We say that, I think.
You like tea?
Okay.
Hi.
What do you want to do?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
That wouldn't be very specific.
Yeah, we haven't learned how to ask like what kind of sport do you like or anything like that yet, so, right, so, yeah,
Oh, we only know.
yeah.
We only know
So,
Saturday and Sunday.
I'm gonna go with
Or what else do we
you could do ongaku o kikimasu ka, or eiga o mimasu ka, or sushi o tabemasu ka. Right, there's lots of options.
Ocha or Jima Sen
Hi.
You said tonight?
Konda no chotto.
Make a difference. Or I could have said yes.
Are right.
土曜日はちょっと
Yeah.
ちょっと
So the so that's
いいですね。Yeah, whole section of this.
Ashton? You said tomorrow?
I can't remember.
Ashton. It's okay.
I know Ashta. They do
映画を見ますか。うちへ来ます。
I got like a minute now.
Right.
Yeah.
晩ご飯を食べますか。
And the worst part is I didn't get one. It was awful. It's for humanities.
すみません。You guys can say すみません。
2
We
weeks
don't
example night. They give
we don't really know how to make excuses. Oh, I have to do this.
I was just
That's how I like it.
so
Well,
bad.
actually, I've seen it
Beautiful.
once.
どうですか Any questions about how to do that?
日曜日に
No.
You want to write it down?
beautiful.
Yeah, you want to talk
Are you saying this one?
something.
Okay. Don't ask.
しませんか
I think. Don't ask.
Speak, say words at the cafe.
Oh,
Oh,
you did say?
because the next chapter we're going to
We'll have a tea.
that would be good.
I'm just reading that. I need to change something.
どうですか
Okay.
そうですか。じゃあ、
Yeah, drink some easy so now. What shall we say?
Alright.
No, turn it down. What shall?
Base, yeah.
So
MLA, they all do MLA.
shall.
Okay. The other thing
But it's
is
just I have a little out of a textbook inside it, and then I have to I have 2 pages where I have to explain it's about the perfect person comparing to written things about the perfect person, and then I have to
Yeah,
say my synopsis to explain why I think that way based on my civilization, and compare it to one of them. The second one. I liked the first one.
I did more than this, but
The Renaissance to something else? Modern day? Or is it the Stone Age to? But you can do these things. It's okay, because my teacher's fun. Yeah. Maybe tomorrow.
She's tired because she stayed up all
so
night.
next check, yeah, we're
That's why I have this.
So we got Moon Day,
I wish so.
Water Day,
Yeah, it does.
Fire Day.
Why?
Yeah, Gold Day is Friday. Yeah.
Nope.
So we're
Yeah, I have to get my paper done and
Saturday is
then to work on my Japanese,
Sunday.
and then I'll sleep next week.
Yeah, we finished this chapter pretty thoroughly, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we
And then, see, I just had my math test. It turns out I have another math test, not next week, the week after that, because we don't have school Wednesday. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. I did